and the judges of the district court recognize that the image is as good as the check, because that is the only method that you can get it. So with the observations, I will go to the next speaker, is Ms. C.S. Gunasekera, who will be addressing to us, making presentation on the inverting the paradox, empowering the natural resources management in the foreign investment regime in Sri Lanka. To you, Ms. Gunasekera.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, the Honorable Chairperson and the distinguished gathering. So today, the topic of my research is Inverting the Paradox, Empowering Natural Resource Management in the Foreign Investment Regime in Sri Lanka. So basically, this is the outline of my presentation today. Ladies and gentlemen, in my research, I focus on whether the domestic legal framework in Sri Lanka is adequate and effective enough to address the overexploitation and unmanaged exploitation of natural resources by foreign investors. So when it comes to natural resources, in the present world, you can notice that most of the resource-rich countries are the developing countries. So because of the fact that most of these countries are developing countries, they don't have the adequate knowledge, the technology, and the capital required to exploit these resources. So what most of these developing countries often does is, they often rely on foreign investments to make use of these resources in their development, in the national development process. Basically, there are two types of foreign investments, as the foreign direct investments and portfolio investments. I have to say that in my research, I focus only on the foreign direct investments, not on the portfolio investments. Now, there's a commonly accepted perception in the world that foreign investments are really beneficial to the sustainable development of the host state. Well, that's true in a way, but then again, we can notice in the present world that most of the developing countries seem to be quite too much obsessed with this phenomena, and what they do is they go on, they adopt various mechanisms to attract more and more foreign investments as a means to go for sustainable development. So what they do is, most often they tend to lower the environmental standards to attract more and more foreign investments. Now, once when the environmental standards are lowered, as you think, what would happen? Now, the ultimate result would be the regulatory mechanism in the host state becomes quite inefficient and inadequate to regulate the conduct of the foreign investments. Conduct of the foreign investors. So as a result, ultimately, because of the conduct of these foreign investors, what happens is the depletion and the degradation of natural resources. So in my research, I've taken two case studies from the Sri Lankan context. One is the famous Bulankulam versus the Secretary, Ministry of Industrial Development, which is also known as the Epavala phosphate mining case. And the other case study I took was the clearance of the Somawati National Park by the US-based Dole Food Company for the purpose of cultivating bananas. So in this backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, the objective of my research is to evaluate the comprehensiveness of the existing foreign investment regime in Sri Lanka in facilitating the optimal use of natural resources and make recommendations for the further development of law in light of the relevant international standards. For this purpose, I conducted this research as a qualitative research based on both the primary sources and the secondary sources. Now, the key argument of my research is, if properly managed, the exploitation of natural resources by foreign investors would lead to sustainable development of the host state. Now, to achieve this purpose, what I propose in my research is to incorporate the concept of natural resource management in the foreign investment regime of the host state. Now, if we have a look at the international standards, internationally we can identify several international instruments that encourage the concept of natural resource management at the hands of foreign investors. So, some examples are the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, UN Global Compact, UN Principles of Responsible Investment, and the North American Free Trade Agreement, which we commonly known as the NAFTA. So, natural resource management. What do we mean by natural resource management? Actually, that is the exploitation of natural resources while preserving them for the exploitation of the present generation as well as the future generation. Now, we can note that most of the environmental law principles endorse this concept of natural resource management. Obviously, the concept of sustainable development. Now, the Brundtland report defines sustainable development as the development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So, obviously, it endorses and upholds the concept of natural resource management. And in addition, the intergenerational and the intragenerational equity, the precautionary principle, and also the environmental impact assessment also promotes natural resource management. So, why are these environmental principles important to us? Because at present we can see that various host states, they have incorporated these environmental law principles that endorse natural resource management into their foreign investment regime. Such examples can be found from the Canada and Russian jurisdictions. Now, ladies and gentlemen, now let's have a look at the Sri Lankan context. In Sri Lanka, the National Environmental Act is the cardinal instrument that deals with the conservation and the management of natural resources. Now, obviously, the Section 17 upholds the management of natural resources, and also, in addition, the environmental impact assessment is also provided by this Act. And the most important thing is, the Board of Investments in Sri Lanka requires the foreign investors seeking entrance to Sri Lanka, to our country, to adhere into these environmental clearances as embodied in the National Environmental Act. In addition, there is a strategic environmental assessment. This is a new concept to Sri Lanka, I guess. But it has been already conducted in the northern province, Hambantota and Trincomalee. But unfortunately, it is not yet incorporated into the legislative framework in Sri Lanka. In addition, the environmental law principles that endorse natural resource management has found expression in the Sri Lankan context in terms of the judicial activism. One such example is in the Epavala case. Just many of such environmental law principles were given recognition. So, ladies and gentlemen, in my research, what I found is, now when compared to the environmental pollution, now in environmental pollution, both in the Sri Lankan context as well as in the international context, we find a number of instruments dealing with environmental pollution. Now, when it comes to the overexploitation and the unmanaged exploitation of natural resources, in both these contexts, this topic, this subject area is not addressed adequately. So, in my research, which is also the final outcome of my research, I propose a mechanism to integrate the natural resource management into the foreign investment regime. So first, it's required to conduct a survey and classify the renewable and non-renewable resources in the host state. And also it's required to carry out a screening process and recognize the beneficial and the detrimental foreign investments. Here the priority should be given for the cutting edge industries. And also, most importantly, I recommend to incorporate the strategic environmental assessment to the National Environmental Act. And also, we can conduct strategic environmental assessments in all districts of the country. I know you'd say it is not practical, but if we can, now this is a proposal, So what I'm proposing is it's better if we can conduct in all the districts of the country, and so that we can decide and classify in which particular districts we should locate the particular industries. And after that, the environmental authorities should submit those details to the Board of Investments, who will then take the responsibility of guiding and instructing the foreign investors as to the exact zones and regions where they can locate their projects. For this purpose, I must say that it's really vital and important to maintain the cooperation and coordination between the environmental authorities and the Board of Investments. And next, I also recommend to encourage the joint venture agreements as much as possible to prevent the foreign investors having the monopoly over the natural resources. And it's also really important to enact laws giving effect to the environmental law principles which endorse the natural resource management in the international context. Further, I think there's a responsibility goes to the Board of Investments as well to ensure the investor compliance with the rules and regulations that we are going to draft. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gunasekera. This dilemma between development and protection. As I mentioned yesterday, out of the world foreign direct investment, the South Asian region gets only 1.7%. The whole of South Asia, all SAARC countries get only 1.7% of the foreign direct investments in the world. So, if we are to encourage foreign direct investment to develop the country, but at the moment, how can we do it? What are the perks or what are the things that we should give them to attract? That is on one side. On the other side, like what Ms. Gunasekera said, can we destroy the future, what belongs to the future generation today? This is the dilemma that runs between when you discuss of this topic. I have been sitting at various negotiations with regard to investment promotion and protection. We sit at the table across countries for cross-border investment to encourage cross-border investment. We all talk of sustainable development. We all talk of environmental protection. We talk all these things, we talk over and over again. I don't think there's a single document that the government of Sri Lanka has entered into with what you call the BITs, bilateral investment treaties, investment protection agreements or promotion and protection agreements. There's not a single one where we have left out environment or the protection of what we call sustainable development. These topics have been discussed in detail. But when it comes to practice, can we do that is the issue. In fact, now the latest trend is to get these things to be obeyed by the investor through the investor's country rather than the investee. Because the investee is always the underdog. We are always asking for investment to come. So therefore, we can't be dictating terms to them. So therefore, now the new trend is the environmentalists, the protectors of the resources are now asking the investor countries to tell your investors that they must follow these guidelines if they want to make investments. So that is going to be the future way the negotiations when we take place. It is true that each and every institution has their role to play, and Sri Lanka has to go a long way in this area. Thank you very much, Ms. Gunasekera, for the presentation.